Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're here for the first time, I'm Jocelyn Binwi and I'm a content creator based in Douala, Cameroon. Yeah, if you're new here, do well to hit the subscribe button, turn on your notification bell so that once any new video comes in, you get a notification and you watch. Thank you in advance. Yeah, in today's video, we're going to be talking about some of the important things we need to consider before relocating as a family. Yeah, we know that thousands of people, so many people relocate every day around the world. It might be movement from one country to the other, it might be movement from one city to the other and stuff like that. Yeah, and this might be for different reasons, like it could be for work, because some people usually have transfers at their job sites, and some people maybe because they had a new job in a different town or a different city or maybe a different country, they might find themselves moving. And some people might be because of business, and some people might be moving because maybe where they are presently it's not comfortable, like maybe they have war or maybe they are facing crisis, for example like what is happening with us in Cameroon right now. And this might cause people to move from one country to the other or from one city to the other. Yeah, and if you're moving as a family, before you relocate your family from one city to the other or from one country to the other, you need to consider the following points. Yeah, the first thing to consider before relocating your family, when we're talking about family, we're talking about your wife, your kids. Yeah, so the first thing to consider before relocating your family should be the climatic conditions of the new place. You need to first of all think, are the climatic conditions going to be favorable for my kids, for my family? Yeah, especially when it concerns kids, you guys, we really need to think about that. For example, if you're moving in Cameroon, let me say from Bamenda to Douala, we know that Bamenda is very cold and Douala is hot. Yeah, especially during the dry season, Douala is so hot. So if you're moving your family from Bamenda to Douala, you need to consider that there are two different climatic conditions. Like one place is colder, is way colder than the other. So you need to consider if the change in climate is going to be favorable for the kids or not. Yeah, because there are some kids who do so well when they live in cold places, and once they move to hot places, you see them falling sick all the time and you find yourself going to the hospital back and forth. Yeah, so we really need to think about that before we move. Yeah, so we really need to consider the climatic conditions, that's the difference in climate, before we move. Or even if you're moving from one country to the other, for example, if you're moving from Cameroon to Nigeria, we know that Nigeria is hotter than Cameroon. Yeah, you need to consider the climatic conditions, the weather, yeah, and all of that. The second thing you need to consider before relocating your family, you guys, is the standard of living. Is it going to be favorable for you and your family? For example, if you've been living in a city or a country which is way more affordable, where life is more affordable, things are cheaper, feeding is okay, you really need to consider, if you're moving to a place that is more expensive, you really need to think about that, whether it's okay to move with your kids or to move by yourself. Yeah, so you need to look into the standard of living, whether the standard of living is high or low, or is going to be okay for you. Is the income you're going to be earning there, is it going to be okay to sustain your family? And the next thing to consider before relocating with your family is education. If you have kids who are going to school, you need to first of all think, this city or this country you're going to, does it have proximity to school? Is proximity to school favorable for you and your family? Do they have the kind of education that is okay for your kids? Like, for example, there are some cities where you find mostly French schools, and maybe your children, they have been doing English education, they have been going through English education, and then you relocate somewhere, and then you find that the most schools around that area are mostly French schools. So it's one thing that we really need to consider. Or if you're moving from one country to the other, you first of all need to think, is the kind of education that your children already have, do you have it in that country? Because there are some countries where you might not, they might have their own different. Okay, for example, if you're moving from Cameroon as an Anglophone to Ivory Coast, which is a French country, you mostly find the French schools, and if you want to find an English school, it's going to be an international school. Are you going to be able to afford your children in that international school so they can continue to study in English like they were doing back in Cameroon? So those are the things that you really need to consider before moving your family from one place to the other. Yeah, so the next thing we should consider before moving with our family, guys, is housing. You need to first of all think, is this place you're moving to, does it have good houses? Does it have are houses there very affordable such that you can get enough accommodation for your family and you're able to pay for it? These are the things that we need to consider, because for example, if you're moving, like let me still say, from Bamenda to Douala, we know that housing in Bamenda is more affordable. House rent in Bamenda is more affordable than house rent in Douala. So to have the kind of space that you have with your family in Bamenda, in Douala, you're going to pay higher than you pay in Bamenda. So you first of all need to think about that. If you get a house that is smaller than what you people have been using, is your family going to be comfortable with that? Are your kids going to be comfortable with that? Are you going to be able to pay for a higher amount as compared to what you have been paying before? And if you're moving from one country to the other, you also need to consider that. You also need to think about housing, house rent, finding a house in an affordable area. And in an area, for example, if you're coming to Douala, you don't even need to only think about finding a house or getting an affordable house. You need to also think about where you're going to live, like, because for example, there are some places in Douala that experience a lot of floods, you guys, flooding during the rainy season, and sometimes you see water entering houses and stuff like that. You really need to consider a lot before moving with your family as concerns housing and house rent. The next thing we need to consider before moving our family, guys, is healthcare. We really need to think about healthcare, the healthcare of that city, the healthcare of the country, how it is like. Is it good? Is it going to be favorable for us and our family? Is it going to be favorable for our kids? Is there proximity to healthcare? Is it easy to find yourself to the hospital, to get yourself or your kids to the hospital when they fall sick? And how health workers also attend to health situations and stuff like that. And the next thing, guys, is feeding. We really need to think about food. Food is very important. There is nobody on this earth who can be living without eating. We need to think about food. Is the kind of food that we have in the new place going to be what your family is going to love? Is it going to be what your kids are going to love? Is food very affordable in the new place where you're moving to? And proximity also to markets, because there are some places where maybe before going to the market you need to travel a very long distance and stuff like that. We really need to think about that before moving with our family. Because for example, there are some countries or there are some cities where it is very difficult to find food, or maybe food is very expensive even when you find it, and maybe the kind of food that your kids are used to eating, you don't have it in the new place and stuff like that. So we really need to consider. So when you're moving, you know whether you're going to move with your food. Are you going to be buying food from your country or your city and bringing and transporting it to where you live and stuff like that? So we really need to think about feeding before we relocate to a new area, to a new city, or to a new country. The next thing, guys, is water. We need to think about water. Do we have potable drinking water? Do we have water, like, because there are some cities or some countries where it's so difficult to get water, to get potable water, especially potable water. So you need to think about that. Do these people use boreholes? Do they have pipe-borne water? You need to know, okay, for example, if you're moving from, let me say, from Boya to Douala, you need to know that Boya has better drinking water than Douala. And so if you're moving with kids, you need to get ready and know that you'll be able to afford for mineral water for them and stuff like that. So you really need to consider the water conditions of a new place before you move your family, because with poor drinking water, they are going to be contracting maybe typhoid or maybe cholera and stuff like that, or bacterial infection and stuff like that, and you find yourself running back and forth to the hospital, which is not really good. The next thing we're going to talk about, guys, is transportation. We need to think about transportation. If you're going with your family, if you're going with your kids, is it going to be possible to have like their means of transportation to go to school, your means of transportation to go to work, maybe your wife going to the market and stuff like that. That's the means of transportation. Do they use taxis? Do they use bikes? Do you have a private car that you're going to be using? And like fuel also, how much fuel costs in the new country? If you have your own car, is it going to be affordable for you? You really need to consider all of that, yeah, before moving with your family from one city or from one country to the other. And the next thing we're going to talk about, guys, is finding a new job for your partner. Yeah, if you're going with your wife, you really need to consider maybe where she had a job there, and maybe she can't move with that job. If she was working for somebody, it is not possible for her to move with the job from one place to the other, except she was an entrepreneur, or maybe she was doing like these mobile jobs that you can always move it from one place to the other. Yeah, so you really need to consider that, because if you have been used to the fact that the income of the family comes from you, the man, and from your wife, and if you're moving to a new place where maybe she's not going to be able to work again like she used to do before, you really need to consider if you will be able to take care of the family single-handedly when it comes to finances and stuff like that. The next thing we're going to talk about, guys, is caregiving. If you're moving with kids, maybe where you guys were, maybe you had a nanny who used to come and go, and yeah, the person who used to take care of your kids while you guys are away. And if you guys are moving to a new city or a new country, and it happens that the both of you are working, how are you guys going to take care of your kids? Are you going to have a caregiver? Are you going to be able to afford for a caregiver in that country or that city where you are? Because if you are not able to move with the caregiver where you were before to the new place where you're relocating, you really need to think about it. If the both of you are working, how are you going to keep your kids at home? Are you going to be able to afford for a caregiver? Are you going to be able to afford for a nanny? Yeah, and stuff like that. So we really need to think about all of that before we move our family from one country or from one city to the other. So guys, this is all I had to share with you all. If you've watched up to this point, thank you so much. And if you haven't yet subscribed, do me well to hit the subscribe button down there, turn on your notification bell so that once any new video comes up, you get a notification and you watch. Thank you, and see you guys in my next one. Bye bye.